An autobiography is a book a person writes about his own life and is usually full of sorts of boring details. This is not an autobiography. I would never write a history of myself. On the other hand, throughout my young days at school and just afterwards, a number of things have happened to me that I've never forgotten. None of these things is important, but each of them have made such a tremendous impression on me that I've never been able to get them out of my mind. Each of them, even after a lapse of 50 and sometimes 60 years, have remained seared on my memory. I didn't have to search for any of them. All I had to do was skim them off the top of my consciousness and write them down. Some are funny. Some are painful. Some are very unpleasant. I suppose that is why I've always remembered them so vividly. All are true. Roald Dahl's Boy. Now that brings us to Roald Dahl in kindergarten. Dahl was reasonably smart, he didn't get in trouble, and was an average grade student. He had a couple of friends, but only remembers the name of one of them, a son of a doctor named Thwaites. Dahl, Thwaites, and the other friends would always stop by a candy shop on their way to school. Dahl would often buy the bootlace candy, which is just like black licorice. Thwaites claims that shoelace is made out of rat blood, but that just made Dahl want to eat it more. The only thing that they didn't like about the shop was the owner, Mrs. Pratchett. Mrs. Pratchett would say things like, "I'm watching you, so you better keep them thieving fingers off them chocolates." Or, "I don't want you in here just to look around. Either you forks out or you gets out." Her blouse had bits of breakfast still on it, dried egg yolk, crumbs, and tea stains. And her hands, as Dahl explains, were the worst. They were black with dirt and grime, and looked as if she had been shoveling coal all day. And remember, there were no little shovels to retrieve the candy in a sanitary way back then, so it was her hands that she shoved in to get the candies. One day, Dahl and his friends came across a dead mouse in the classroom and decided to drop into one of the candy jars in the candy shop. That brings us to the Great Mouse Plot. "One Schubert sucker, please," said Thwaites. And he dropped it in. He had done it. He had done it. Roald Dahl was a hero from that day on. He was afraid and happy at the same time, but knew nothing what would happen the next day. The next day the candy shop was closed, and they had little suspicion, but not terribly much. Until, at recess, they were asked to line up from youngest grade to highest grade. Then they heard Mrs. Pritchett's voice saying, "Where's the little buggers? There's the ones that come into my room and mess everything up with their grubby little hands. There they are. Send them to their office to get caned." So, they got caned. Ow! 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 Yep. That night, when Dahl was taking his bath, his mother gasped from behind him, "What happened to you?" So Dahl had to tell her the story of the Great Mouse Plot. When he was finished, his sisters almost looked like they were going to faint from laughter. Then his mom didn't think it was funny, though. She went out to talk to the headmaster immediately. When she came back, she said, "Your father is right. English boarding schools are the best. I'm sorry you'll have to go to a boarding school." After Dahl was caned, his mom moved him to a boarding school called St. Peter's, which is mostly where the rest of this book takes place. At St. Peter's, the ground floor is made up of classrooms, and the first floor is all dormitories. And who ruled the dormitories? the female ogre, the matron. Once in the dormitories, students are in her power, her control. At any time she liked, she could send you down to the merciless headmaster to get caned. Each dormitory had approximately 20 beds, according to Roald Dahl. To illustrate how horrible the matron is, here is a story, which is one of the many horrifying stories that Dahl tells in this chapter. A boy named Tweety, at age 8, started snoring, and when the matron heard him, she yelled, "Who's talking?" When the matron saw that Tweety was snoring, not talking, she took her scissors, always hanging from her belt, a bar of soap, and started shaving little pieces off the soap. After that, she simply dropped the shavings into his mouth. Pretty soon, his mouth started to bubble. Next, his face was covered in foam. "What happened to me?" he said, asked between coughs. "Nasty habit to snore. Hasn't anybody taught you not to sleep on your back?" yelled the matron. "Go wipe up and stop snoring." Then she slammed the door shut. This matron is where Dahl got the idea to write Matilda. The matron is Miss Trunchbull, the evil principal. In my opinion, if Dahl was to give out prizes for the meanest person, first place would go to the headmaster. Second place would go to the matron. And third place would go to the masters, or as we call them, the teachers. During prep time, which is like study hall or catch-up, Dahl was writing a report when his nib broke. A nib is like a fragile pen. He asked a kid named Dobson for an extra nib. The teacher jumped to his feet and yelled, "You were talking, I saw you, don't you try to deny it." I needed a nib, sir. Mine broke, so I asked." Roald Dahl tried to explain. "Liar! Liar! You are obviously trying to cheat. Go down to see the headmaster." The teacher wrote up a note for lying, cheating, talking back, and for disrupting the class, which none of these Dahl did. I can see why in almost every book he wrote why the grown-ups are portrayed in such a horrible way. The next part of this book talks about Dahl's life at age 14, but I think it'd be better if you read that by yourself. Dahl went straight from high school to work and could choose to work for Imperial Chemicals, a lumber company, or Shell, the gas station. Shell was a pretty big deal back then, and Dahl decided to work for Shell in East Africa. A war broke out and Dahl fought in it, but he says that's another story. Thank you so much for watching my report, and I hope you enjoyed my summary. I also hope you read this book, and if you like this biography by him, Writing Solo is another one, centered around him just writing. Ask the present David for any questions.